Outside.
911, what's your emergency?
Hello, everyone. Welcome to episode 8 of my series Crafts and Crimes. Every week I post a new video of myself crafting while talking about a different true crime. This week I will be talking about the case of Edwin Mike Bernard Kaprat III, otherwise known as the Granny Killer. Edwin Kaprat was born in New York City on September 21, 1964, to parents Edwin Skip Bernard Kaprat Jr., a refrigeration mechanic, and Ruth Kaprat, a real estate agent. He was the youngest of 2 children and had an older sister named Ruthie. When Edwin was young, the family relocated to the Great Meadows area of Independence Township, New Jersey. The family were described by the community as upstanding citizens. Edwin, who was nicknamed Mike by family members, was said to be intelligent and loved reading books, but he was also known to be a very violent and easily angered bully who would go after those smaller and weaker than himself. He was given stuffed animals by his teachers that he could punch and kick as a way to redirect his anger. Edwin allegedly began drinking at 12 years old, which led to a lifelong addiction to alcohol. He was in and out of juvenile treatment centers and juvenile courts on numerous occasions due to his addiction. Kaprat dropped out of Hackettstown High School just after his 16th birthday to marry his pregnant girlfriend Nora in November 1982. The birth of his 2 sons didn't stop him from continuing to drink and use marijuana. Despite his hot temper, Mike was well liked by his family and friends. In October 1990, Edwin and Nora Kaprat moved to Spring Hill, Florida with their 2 sons to start a new life. On February 22, 1991, the body of 27-year-old Lee Anthony Bugbee III was discovered in a mangrove near the Courtney Campbell Causeway in Tampa. His body was discovered by a man who had been out sunbathing. The authorities determined that Bugbee had injuries to his head consistent with being beaten by either a pipe or a tire iron. His car was discovered at a nearby boat ramp, along with both tire tracks and boot prints that investigators took plaster casts of. The hope was that these tracks would help lead them to the killer. A few hours after the discovery of Lee Bugbee's body, the investigators received word that his credit card was used to purchase gasoline at a Texaco station the day before. After further investigation, they found that the person who had used the card was Edwin Kaprat, who had since returned to Hackettstown, New Jersey. On March 9, 1991, he surrendered himself to the police in New Jersey after learning of the arrest warrant that was issued for him. Not long after, Kaprat was extradited back to Florida on charges of first-degree murder, armed robbery, and forgery. Before the trial began, the police attempted to link Edwin Kaprat to an arson attack on another man, but there wasn't enough evidence for him to be linked to the second crime. During his trial, it was determined that his confession to the murder of Lee Bugbee was unreliable, so Kaprat was only convicted on the forgery charge and dealing in stolen property. He was placed under house arrest at his parents' house in Hernando County, Florida. Edwin was later arrested for violating his house arrest and sent to prison until May 7, 1993. During this time, his wife divorced him because of his volatile temper and his aggression towards their children, which she believed was caused by his own alleged childhood abuse. He also dropped out of school at Hillsborough Community College. After Edwin Kaprat was released from prison, he wrote a very bizarre letter to his attorney in New Jersey. In the letter, he alleged that his oldest son had attempted to murder his younger brother and had sexually molested his mother. These allegations couldn't be substantiated, and it's unclear why Kaprat wrote the letter in the first place. Edwin Kaprat began work as a machinist at the Paget Swan Machinery Company, which allowed him to commute between Hudson and Spring Hill. On August 7, 1993, a fire broke out at the Spring Hill home of 80-year-old Sophia Frances Garrity, affectionately known as the Cookie Lady. She was a retired public relations employee from New Jersey who lived alone and was well respected and liked by everyone in the community. By the time the fire department arrived to put out the flames, she had perished in the fire, or so it seemed. The community was shocked. It was determined by investigators that the fire was caused by an electrical short in Garrity's bedroom, and it was spread by the fan also in her bedroom. Her death was ruled accidental, and Edwin Kaprat was never charged with her murder. 10 days later, on August 17, elderly couple 84-year-old William Bill Whitney and his wife 83-year-old Alice Whitney were found beaten up in their home. They were trying to sell their home, and it appeared they had been attacked by someone pretending to be interested in purchasing it. Neighbors alerted the police and fire department when they heard Bill screaming and heard the couple's smoke detector going off. Firefighters quickly put out the fire that had failed to spread but was clearly set intentionally. The Whitneys were transported to Bayfront Health in St. Petersburg, Florida. However, because Bill had a severe head injury that left him in a vegetative state and Alice suffered with Alzheimer's disease, they were unable to provide any useful information about the man who attacked them. There was no weapon found at the scene and a lack of clear motivation for the crime, which quickly left the investigation at a standstill. On August 18, one day after the attacks on Bill and Alice Whitney, there was another fire reported in the nearby community of Brookridge. When firefighters arrived at the scene, they discovered the body of 70-year-old Ruth Goldsmith, a retiree who had moved into the area 2 years prior from Havertone, Pennsylvania. The fire caused $65,000 worth of damage, and the mobile home was completely destroyed. The investigation into the fire determined that it was most likely caused by an electrical short somewhere in the master bedroom. The case was quickly dismissed as another accidental death. In the weeks following Ruth Goldsmith's death, several elderly women living in the area began to receive harassing phone calls. The calls were sexual in nature and were believed by those receiving them to have come from the same person. On September 2, there was another fire in Brookridge, this time at the home of 79-year-old Lydia Riddell. She was a retired food store manager from Media, Pennsylvania, and a friend of Ruth Goldsmith. While investigating the home, the charred body of Lydia was found in the house. Her hands had been bound with duct tape, and there were signs that she had been sexually assaulted. The death was ruled a homicide and led investigators to take a closer look at the death of Ruth Goldsmith to determine if the two incidents were connected. It was revealed during the investigation that before her murder, Lydia Riddell had received 3 of the harassing phone calls in the week before her death. On the 26th of September, 87-year-old Lorraine Alice Burnham Daw was found beaten to death in her mobile home in Spring Hill. The investigators determined that she had been sexually assaulted and had her neck stomped on repeatedly. It was clear that there had been an attempt to burn down the home. Lorraine's body was discovered buried under a stack of bedspreads and pillows which had been set on fire, but that fire failed to spread to the rest of the house. After the attack on a 5th elderly victim, the FBI was called in to assist with the investigation. A few days after the death of Lorraine Daw, the police received an anonymous tip that they should investigate Edwin Kaprat. They were surprised to find that his fingerprints matched those found on a garage window at Daw's house, which was next door to his sister Ruthie's house and across the street from Sophia Garrity's. There wasn't enough evidence, however, to tie Edwin Kaprat to the crime, and so he was placed under 24-hour surveillance. Looking into Edwin Kaprat's past, the investigators were able to find links to all of the victims. On October 3, authorities recorded a conversation between Skip Kaprat and neighbor Maria Van Nieuwenhuis, where the elder Kaprat confessed he had done work for all the victims and his son had helped him. It was revealed that Edwin had dated Sophia Garrity's granddaughter until she passed away from cancer in 1992. His father had erected the for sale sign outside the Whitneys' home and done a kitchen remodel for Lydia Riddell. It was further revealed that Ruth Kaprat had sold the mobile home to Ruth Goldsmith. There was also a statement made to an undercover police officer giving Edwin Kaprat a lift to his parents' home. It is alleged that he said that his girlfriend was pissed with him for a strange bite on his neck. Authorities were also able to further link Edwin to the crimes through DNA evidence found on cigarette butts found at some of the crime scenes. On October 8, 1993, an arrest warrant was issued for Edwin Kaprat III, as were search warrants for his residence, car, and his pubic hair. He was arrested near his parents' home on the same day and confessed to the crimes the following day. Investigators were particularly disturbed by his confession to the murder of Lorraine Daw. In his confession, Kaprat allegedly said that he stepped on Mrs. Daw's neck and broke it to, quote, put her out of her misery when she was having a heart attack after he sexually assaulted her. Edwin Kaprat was held without bail and charged with 4 counts of murder, 2 counts of attempted murder, 4 counts of sexual battery, 6 counts of residential burglary involving battery, 5 counts of arson, and 1 count of robbery. Investigators also hoped that Kaprat would now finally properly confess to the murder of Lee Bugby. On November 19, William Whitney passed away at his son's home in Hancock County, Mississippi. William, who was in a vegetative state since the brutal attack in August, died of complications from pneumonia. These complications were a direct result of the attack by Edwin Kaprat, so he was also charged for the murder of William Whitney as well. On January 2, 1995, during jury selection, he tried to take his own life by slashing his wrist. Edwin Kaprat's suicide attempt was unsuccessful and his trial for the death of Lydia Riddell began as scheduled. There was a lot of interest in the trial due to the high-profile nature and the viciousness of the crimes. After being determined to be sober and sane at the time of the crime, Kaprat was charged with first-degree murder. During the trial, a taped confession was played for the jury. The defense argued that because police kept yelling at Edwin and calling him a liar, that the tape was proof of coercion. However, the prosecutor excused it by saying the police were merely calling him out on his lies. The trial lasted for 10 days and Edwin Kaprat was found guilty on January 12 by the jury after 8 hours of deliberation. He was sentenced to death for the crime. Not long after the first trial, Edwin Kaprat was put on trial again. This time it was for the murder of Lorraine Daw. Again, he was found guilty by the jury on January 20 and sentenced to death for the second time. Throughout both trials, Edwin Kaprat was uninterested in the proceedings and was supposedly reading a book the entire time. His family, unsuccessfully, begged the jury to spare him the second death sentence. Edwin Kaprat was held on death row at Florida State Prison in Bradford County, Florida. On April 19, 1995, Kaprat and fellow inmate Charles Street were stabbed to death by Mario Lara and Rigoberto Sanchez Velasco. Both men were charged with third-degree murder. Sanchez Velasco was executed in 2002 for his crimes and Lara remains imprisoned for life on a double murder charge. Kaprat's death was met with relief by the family members of his victims, most of whom believed that he got what he deserved. As a result of Edwin Kaprat's death, the remaining cases were dropped and they were all officially closed. Thank you for joining me on this episode of Crafts and Crimes. If you're interested in the things I'm crafting, please check out the links in the description. If you enjoyed the video, please leave a like and comment below with what future cases you want me to talk about. Don't forget to subscribe with notifications on so you don't miss out on any future uploads. I'll see you all next time.